Hi, Kathy. We have Professor Kathy Schwalbe with us today, author of Information Technology Project Management, which is a textbook we use here at the University of Sydney for one of our project management subjects titled Project Process Planning and Control.
It's early in the morning for you, right?
Yeah, just still trying to wake up. Kathy is a professor at the Department of Business Administration at Osberg College in the United States since 1991 and is named Educator of the Year by the Association of IT Professionals in 2011. Kathy is often known as the PhD, PMP, and Mother of Three. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Kathy, it's a pleasure to have you, and I know you have a busy schedule, so it's really a pleasure, and students would really find it beneficial to be able to see the author of their textbook and receive some words of wisdom from you. So
Okay.
thanks again for joining, and so what I'll start with is a few questions about your background, how you got into project management, and why you started books. So yeah, if you could just let us know a little bit about your background and how you got into project management.
Okay. I'm the middle child of seven children, so I think that helps right there, being able to negotiate, and had four brothers, so kind of was raised pretty tough.
All right.
Went into college. I was actually the first in my family to go to college, and I was on an Air Force scholarship. So here in the United States, they have programs where the Air Force will pay for you to go through college, which is very expensive here. So I was in that program, and there were several opportunities there to be in charge of different, events and different people. So that helped. And then I also was active in sports. So, I was helped start up women's soccer at University of Notre Dame, played in high school, played on the boys team in high school. So, kind of, got into leadership roles
Mm-hmm.
early on in that sense. And then when I finished college, so I owed the Air Force 4 years. So my first job at age 22 was as a project manager out in the Boston area. And I actually worked not on base, I worked at a company, Miter Corporation. So there were a lot of very intelligent people. It was founded by MIT, so a lot of very smart people. But here I was, this young woman put in charge of this project, which I knew nothing about the technology. I knew, nothing really about that part of the Air Force, but I knew how to read people, how to communicate with people, how to pull things together. So I really liked the role of a project manager. And there they kind of test you, they give you a smaller project. If you're good at it, you get a bigger project. If you're good at it, you get an even bigger project. So, I kind of went along that track. So I think that happens a lot of places. You can't always be a project manager day one, but you might be a project coordinator or assistant project manager. And then if they see that you have the interest and the aptitude and you do well, usually you'll get recognized, and they love to just throw more work at you. So, and if you enjoy it, that's the thing, you have to enjoy it. So I enjoy coordinating things, having a lot of smart people do, a lot of the super technical work, but you'd have to understand enough about it to be in charge of it. So after the Air Force then, and I got married pretty early, married my college sweetheart. He was not in the military. He got his PhD. So then we moved to St. Louis, which is in the middle of the United States. So we went from the East Coast to the Midwest, and he got a position as a professor right away. And I got a position at Boeing, which, makes airplanes. It was McDonnell Aircraft Company at the time. But there they wouldn't let, a young person be in charge of a big project. So I had to kind of be on a project team, which was fine, but, again, you have to prove yourself every time you move to a different organization. But, I did very well there. And then IT was just becoming its own department at a lot of companies. And again, this was in the mid 80s, before you were probably even born, or before most your students were born. So, then I got a lot of hands-on experience in IT, and moved into consulting more, which I also liked. And then I got the chance to be an independent consultant. And I did want to talk a little bit about the difference in project management in a big company versus as a consultant or having your own business. So when I was an independent consultant, it was with an oil company, Clark Oil. So again, I knew nothing about the oil business, but I knew about IT. I knew how companies could make more money, how they could save more money, and I could manage projects. So in those 7 months, I spent more money than I had in the prior 10 years, because the company had cash and was way behind in technology. So they pretty much let me figure out what they should do. And then I'd go, find the contracts and organize the project teams and, implement all types of different systems. So I really enjoyed the consulting role, but it's very risky, because you're an outsider. So you really have to have a strong business case and definitely produce the results. But I really enjoyed that role. Then I got into teaching kind of because, and I don't want to insult any faculty, but to me it was much easier to be a professor than it was to be an employee or even a consultant. Because, you're working 50 weeks out of the year, 5 days a week, 40, 50 hours a week. Whereas when you're a professor, you have a lot more control over your time and your schedule, and you don't have customers and bosses and people. Sure. To me, it was less pressure. And, I enjoyed the teaching, enjoyed doing the research, and then writing the books. I got into that because we actually had an adjunct professor who said you really should have a course in project management as part of your management information systems program. So he developed the first course for our adult students, and he didn't use a book. He just used his own materials, and it was very popular. He worked at IBM, which, that company is very good at project management. And then I was asked to teach the course to our traditional students. And the first time I taught it was a 1-month term. We used to have a January term, and it's like you have to have structure, you have to have a book. So I looked at the PMBOK guy and I'm like, no, you can't use that. And back then it was not even 200 pages long. It's gotten much longer. I looked at Harold Kersner's book. I said, no, I won't do that to my students. It was like 1,200 pages and a lot of very old examples. So I used some other book that I didn't like, and then I used a different book, and the class kept getting more and more popular, and we had several other people teaching it. And another adjunct approached me and said, why don't we write a book together? So, I thought, well, I guess we could give it a shot. But then he had no time. So I put together the prospectus and got a publisher right away. So it's kind of, necessity is the mother of invention. We needed a good book. So I, wrote the book the way I thought I would want a book, to follow the knowledge areas of the PMBOK, to include Microsoft Project, to have real examples throughout. And, it's been extremely successful. And I've written an introductory book and now a healthcare book also. So I actually enjoy the writing aspects also. And then to me, that's even easier than the teaching, is doing the writing. So.
Fantastic. We basically used your textbook. This one, this is the 6th edition, and there's the 7th edition. So, so you've written other books on project management as well as some books outside the field.
What happened at our university is probably happened there too, but after 2000, you had the big .com bust, so you didn't have as many jobs in IT. The decline in students majoring in computer science or IT, started around 2000, so we didn't have as many majors who needed that class, but we had a lot of interest from other business majors, so we'll get a lot of management majors, marketing, accounting. I've had theater majors, sociology majors. So, any major would benefit from a project management course. But my IT book was too technical. I didn't want to use someone else's book. So I asked my publisher, I said, well, what if I write an introductory book? Even though there were probably 50 on the market at the time, they said, sure, give it a shot. So I wrote the introductory book. And then my publisher decided after 2 editions, they got bought, and they decided just to keep my IT one, not my introductory one. So that's how I got into self-publishing. So that was a project in itself, because it's like, I want to use that book. I don't want to use somebody else's book. So I learned about publishing, and now I actually sold more copies of that than my publisher did.
Yeah.
with very little marketing, but I lowered the price and I made the website free. So I think that was a good strategy.
Oh,
And then I was approached to write a healthcare project management book last year, but I have never really worked in the healthcare field. And I said, well, I would want a co-author who has that hands-on experience in healthcare. So I did have a co-author. So that book came out end of May. So yeah, and I have people asking me to write more and more. So hopefully I
that's
can
fantastic. I
be
mean,
productive and write more.
you do enjoy writing, so it works out quite well. Yeah.
I do, and it's funny because I always liked science and technology. I knew there was more money in science and technology at a very early age. And my high school teachers, I took several courses where you had to read books during break and write papers, and I hated that. You know, I hated reading all these history books and literature books, but I got very good at reading and writing. So I really thank those high school teachers, because when I got to college, any class where you wrote a paper to me was just very easy. So the writing to me came pretty easy. To me, the technical knowledge was more difficult. So I think there aren't many people that have the technical knowledge who can also write. So I found a niche there.
Yes, and your PhD. So your PhD was focused around project management as well. Is that right?
No, actually, I got my professorship without having a PhD, but I was told when I was hired that I could not be tenured unless I got a PhD. And the only place I could get a PhD was at the University of Minnesota. And this was back in, well, I started at Augsburg in 1991. So no, they did not even have a class in project management at the time, let alone a master's or PhD program. So I actually got my PhD part-time, and my college paid for it. So I was in a tenure track position teaching a full load and got my PhD part-time, but it's in higher education. So it was actually very good. So I had a class on teaching and learning and cognitive development, which, you know, I had never had any of that. So it really helped me, I think, in teaching. And again, to me, I didn't think it was hard getting the PhD because it was all papers, and I could write papers and do research. So and I tested out of all the statistics because I did that in my job. I did a lot of statistical analysis, and I was a math major as an undergraduate. So and they didn't have computer science or IT when I was an undergrad. It wasn't there yet. So and if I'm older than I look.
And if you compare, like, getting the PMP compared to the PhD, which one did you feel is kind of more valuable?
The PMP, and again, I do think it's a good certification, but it's just a screening. And I have given a lot of PMP prep classes, and I think a good high school student could pass the PMP exam. It's all multiple choice. You only need like 62, 65%. They won't tell you the exact percentage. You need to memorize a lot of the terms. To me, any of the math ones were a piece of cake. You know, you can calculate earned value and all that kind of stuff. Those are black and white answers, but there were a lot of situational type questions that, you know, even I would get some wrong. You know, I don't know anyone who's gotten more than 95%. When I took the test, I actually took it before I wrote my book, just because I thought, well, I might as well take it and then make my book help people get certified. And I only got, I think, 88% on it. But to me, the questions were not worded very well. They weren't very straightforward. But yeah, I don't think it was that difficult at all. I think getting my bachelor's was harder than my master's and PhD, to be honest. To get the bachelor's, I went to University of Notre Dame, which is a pretty difficult school, and I was a math major. I started in engineering, but switched to math, so that was a pretty rigorous program. And my master's was an MBA program, which again was rigorous, but to me the business was easier to understand than a lot of the science and math. And then education to me was also easier, but maybe it's easier to learn once you've gone through the ropes a bit. But PMP is a piece of cake. Yeah, tell your students, take it. If you don't pass it, just take it again. You'll know what to study.
And lastly, being mother of 3, how difficult was that?
How difficult was that? Well, now they're all adults, so it's nice being an empty nester now. But we were very fortunate. All of our kids, we didn't really have any problem children. They were good students, no troublemakers or
Well, they got
anything.
that from their mother and
Well,
father
more
as
from their
well.
father. My friends used to say that, oh, Kathy, you're just so calm, and then they met my husband. They're like, Kathy, you're basket case compared to your husband. So he's very laid back and mellow. So I guess the combination worked well.
Exactly. Thanks for that, Kathy. So now let's move on to some words of wisdom for the students. So what are some important things for students entering in the field of project management and pursuing that kind of field?
Yeah, the biggest advice I would give is, especially early on, you need to get experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's with your sports team, be the captain of your sports team, or if you're organizing an event, volunteer to be in charge of that event. Just practice being in a leadership role. And then also learn to recognize people's skills around you and take advantage of other people's skills. Never feel like you're unworthy or you're stupid because you don't understand something. Find the expert who understands it and let them do that. You can't do everything, so you have to learn to delegate. A lot of people don't want to let go, but realize that there are other people that are better at a lot of things than you are, so delegate those. And the project manager is really organizing all that, and then also making sure the project is a good project. I mean, it's going to help the organization, it's going to help the business, so you have to understand the business. I know when I was in IT, I didn't really care how companies made money. Even when I was at Boeing, I worked on a space plane project. I worked on some really cool projects. It was all the latest and greatest technology. But once I started learning how the company ticked, how they made money, that's when I became more valuable. So, as soon as you can start thinking that way, thinking more strategically, thinking what does the organization need, not just what is my little role, what's my little project, I think that's a good thing to do. And you might not have that, in your 20s, but definitely by the time you're in your 30s, you should look at the bigger picture. And, you might not want to stay in project management that long. You'd want to get into even higher level role.
So from what you mentioned, leadership is kind of an essential skill for project managers, like more than the technical aspects of project management. Is that right?
I would say so. But again, on an IT project, that's why I need to qualify. And I think part of it is the nature of people who work in IT, because it is difficult getting that bachelor's degree in computer science or IT or math or engineering. So people feel like, well, I worked hard, I understand this technology. So often they'll resent it if someone is assigned to be in charge who knows nothing, has never written a line of code and doesn't know acronyms. So I have seen, where people will fail because they can't get the respect of the workers. So you do need to have the respect of the people on the team, and keep learning yourself. But like I said, find out who's the best at different aspects of the project, and help them to grow and help them to get even better technically. You won't match their technical skills. There's no way you can keep up with it.
Exactly. So the best combination is having the technical skills and the soft skills that's required to communicate and so on. So how different was it to manage projects? I think you briefly mentioned about that. So the difference between managing projects as a consultant versus an employee.
Yeah, and as an employee, especially with a large company, large companies have kind of their business processes and the way they do things. So they don't like to go outside of the box. If something's supposed to take so long, it will take so long. But as a consultant, that's where I felt like there was no red tape. I was getting paid a lot of money. If I had all the business case and said you need to spend $1 million on this, and you convince the right people, they'd write a check and spend $1 million on something. I never saw that at a big company, but if you're a consultant for a big company, I think often, they will listen to your advice. So I really enjoyed that. And then also, I remember when I was younger, one of my uncles, well, he's retired now and he gave the business to his son, but he had his own business. It was more construction business out in California. But he told me when I was like 15, he said, you really need to start your own business. That's the only way to really make it in America. And he was from Germany. So now I do have my own business with the publishing and some of the consulting, and it's very different, very rewarding, so it's different from being an employee. So I don't know how it is in Australia, if there are many consulting positions or contract things on the side, but
there is. I mean,
that's a good way to develop your skills too.
I mean, I kind of started a company a couple of years ago, and I just realized how difficult it is to run a business. It was a really great experience, but I felt like I just need to be somewhere more stable. So that's why I
More
returned to
stable.
university.
But that's why the teaching position. See, that's the best of both worlds. You have a
I think
stable
so.
teaching position, and then you can go do your business on the side. But
That's
even,
right.
as a full-time employee, you can have a little side business. I think that stimulates your mind and realize, that there are other opportunities out there.
Exactly. It's a great challenge as well. Yeah. So going back to leadership again, what do you think are 5 key characteristics or traits of great leadership in project management, so that students can kind of encompass and develop those skills?
Yeah, and I know some of this I have in the book, but I do believe that you need to lead by example. So if you say you need to show up on time, then you yourself should show up on time. If you say that your communication should be very clear, then you should do that. So definitely, leading by example is very important. Second one I would say again is being a strategic leader. So understanding the big picture and where your project fits in with the rest of the organization. Another one would be the people skills. So, treating people well. I believe that people want to achieve, they want to do a good job. So you need to create that environment where everyone can do their best work. So kind of get some of the stuff out of the way. Like I see that a lot of very smart technical people hate paperwork. They hate going to meetings. They hate giving presentations. So try to minimize the things that people don't like to do, so, kind of protect them from that and protect them from the politics and let them focus on the work that they have to do.
So basically identifying the strength.
Yeah, but try to, get, and I always hated politics, still hate politics, but I can play politics very well. And that's something also in academia. I know a lot of people that have left academia because they could not do what it takes to get the tenure and the promotions because there's a lot of politics involved. So in every organization, there's politics. So, and the project manager has to understand those politics, work the politics, but like I said, try to cushion the team so they don't have to waste their time with a lot of those politics.
No, thanks for that. So if that's all right, let's get into some of the questions from students. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay, so the first question is by Sagar Mansour, and Sagar is saying, a project and its carbon footprint. Do you think the current project management methodology addresses this environmental component, and will project managers be required to deal with this aspect on projects? To respond to this, do you see carbon offsetting establishing itself in the project management methodology?
And to me, and I do have, I think it was in a 6th edition where I introduced some of the case studies, and I don't know if you use those, but I have a couple of them on green computing and green technologies. So, I mean, that whole area is a big theme globally. So, yes, I think it's very important. In terms of project management, I don't think it's different. Like, I don't think they're ever going to add a another knowledge area for green project management. There is a book actually called Green Project Management, but you can use project management on a green project. You can use it on any kind of project, you know. So to me, I don't think you need to change the methodology. You just have to make that a requirement of the project, and you know, a goal of the project, one of the success criteria of the project, you know, a business case that you wouldn't even approve the project. You have to have the metrics to measure that. So it still fits into the regular project management methodology, but that's just a focus.
And we can probably say the same thing with human factors. You know, it's not really inbuilt into the methodologies, but it's something really important that we need to consider when managing people, for instance. Is that right?
Right. It's more part of the product life cycle. So if you're building an information system, the human factors is, you know, the interface and all the human factors, that's part of the product. Same thing with the green technology, you know, that's often part of the product. So the project management to me is the same, but it's the product life cycle that might be different.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So the next question is by Wingyan Jung. And she says, I find it very difficult to manage and engage stakeholders because they are always busy and they may not see the direct benefits, for example, money or reputation benefits as a result of involving in my project. What are some possible strategies for project managers to break this barrier and strengthen the relationship?
Yeah. So there, I mean, and it kind of sounds like maybe the person isn't in that high level of a position in the organization. So it's hard to convince people to spend the time on your project. So that's the case where I would say talk to your sponsor, talk to higher level management, make sure they let people know how important the project is so that they get the involvement. You know, I think you need to have that, but also a couple things I have done some examples. One project when I was at Boeing or McDonnell Douglas, I had to get people outside of our company to help me because, like, we didn't have, for example, the project management software. Back then it was mainframe based, pen plotters, but we had a contract where they wanted us to do the network diagrams and critical path and all this kind of stuff. So I had to convince someone at a different company within, you know, the corporation to run the software for me. He didn't need to do it, you know, but he was a younger guy, had young kids, you know, so I kind of developed a personal relationship. He liked ho-hos. I don't know if you have that. It's like a sweet, a chocolate-filled cupcake, kind of. So, like, I would bring him food whenever I'd meet him. And then I also, when he finished doing that work for me, I had my boss's boss write a letter to his boss's boss acknowledging, you know, how grateful we were for the work that he did. You know, so by, you know, you can develop lower level relationships and get things done, but often it has to be a personal connection, and anything that people like, food, you know, just acknowledging them. But then, like I said, that letter was real important. And then I had to do it again. You know, I had to have a higher level person in an organization, have some people do some work. And there it was the pumpkin pies. They like pumpkin pies. So I'd bring them pumpkin pies and they'd do work for me. But again, I would get the higher ups to talk to their bosses, and that was helpful.
Well, it seems like everything is based around relationships and understanding people.
A lot of it is, but also understanding how it's going to help the organization make money or fulfill whatever their objectives are too.
Fantastic. Oh, so another question by Winyang is, my organization is more like a weak matrix organization. The functional manager and the executive director have the power to control most of the project decisions. However, one thing that frustrates me is that neither of them has any background in project or program management. So for other project coordinators, they don't have a problem because they also don't have any background in project management. So they just follow the direction given by the functional manager or ED. But for me, I feel really frustrated because there are a lot of confusions and bad practices that almost caused project failure a few times. We have no program manager, So there is a lot of duplications among projects, and hence the efficiency and outcomes are not maximized. So my question is, for a situation like this, I know persuasion to management team to understand project management is quite impossible. But what would be some possible strategies for me to deal with the management at the same time making sure that my project won't become a failure because of their strong authority?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question, and you probably won't like the answer, but sometimes you need to move to another organization.
No.
And I've done that. I mean, and I've seen, like, the Air Force, I think, was very good at project management. You know, and the military was one of the groups that started it, military and construction. Parts of Boeing, so at first I was in engineering, they were very good at project management. When I got into IT, they were horrible. You know, it was terrible how they tried to select projects, you know. But that's where, you know, if you can try to run your project well, then maybe they'll see, you know, that what you're doing works. But if you can't get the support from the top, and if the whole organization doesn't believe in the value, I would look elsewhere, to be honest, if that's the field you want to go into. And there are books, there are a lot of books and articles and seminars on convincing senior management about the value of project management. But I mean, if they're not convinced by now, I don't know if they will be. And there are a lot of companies looking for good project managers. So I'd say maybe you just need to look elsewhere.
So it is in demand. So it's a matter of just finding where is the most suitable place for them. Is that right?
Right. If you're fighting too much and being frustrated and you can't make a difference, then I'd say look for
time to
a
move
different
on.
position.
Yeah. Sure. So we have sorry.
Life is too short to
That's
stay
right.
in that situation.
That's right. There's no point struggling, right? So we have a question by Michael Tracy, and so this is more around management of complex projects. So he says the management of complex project is never an exact science, but it is possible to create a is it possible to create a best standard for managing them, or will the management of complex projects draw the line in the sand, so to speak, where the art of project management becomes more important than the science?
Yeah, and I have worked on a lot of projects where you need that science, and they were the very complex projects. I mean, one example on a spaceplane project, we had a lot of risks involved, and we had a lot of different areas. So we're trying to design a plane that would replace the space shuttle. So the plane would go 24 times the speed of sound, you know, so the whole so we had all types of engineers working on it. Myself and another guy were in charge of the risk analysis. So he was full-time doing risk analysis for this project in the very early stages, conceptual stages. And we actually had probably 20 people help us write a program. It was actually in Fortran way back when. And we had a consulting company, had a Monte Carlo simulation tool that we used. You know, so we put together a very, very sophisticated computer model, ran all these simulations to help us figure out where we should invest in technologies to get this thing to work. So, I mean, there's a lot of science. So I'm saying on very complex projects, often that's where you need the more difficult science, just to make sure you're even working on the right thing or putting the resources in the right place. But then once you get further along, then you need the people skills to, you know, convince people that, you know, this data is good and this is what you need to do. So, I mean, to me, you need both. You can't really separate the hard skills from the soft skills. Sometimes you need more hard skills, sometimes you need more soft skills.
It's really interesting what you mentioned there is doing the right things. And there's a quote by Peter Drucker which goes like, management is doing things right and leadership is doing the right things. So it's really
Correct.
about
Yeah.
doing the right things right, isn't it, when it comes to project
Yeah.
management?
Yeah. That's right.
Mm,
Yeah, and you can teach anyone to be a good manager. And I don't know if you've heard that,
mm, mm,
but it's more difficult to learn those soft
mm,
skills. But you can learn the soft skills. Even myself, I was always very quiet,
mhm,
especially in high school and college, and I hated presenting.
mhm,
But the way to get ahead and to get noticed and get decisions made is to be a good presenter.
mm,
So I actually volunteered when I was in the Air Force. They had a base presentation team where they'd have two young officers give like a presentation when people came to visit the base. So it was just explaining the base and this and that. So I forced myself to join that team just so I would get more comfortable giving presentations, and that helped quite a bit. So, I mean, you can develop the soft skills. I
mm,
also took a week-long class in consulting skills. So you'd learn to read people's eyes, how they move move their eyes around tells you a lot about them, the way they speak, what types of words they use. So reading the body language. So you can learn a lot of those skills, and that definitely comes in handy
mm,
in, business world and raising the kids. Yeah. You learn to understand each child differently based on those, body language cues.
mhm, mhm. And do you think it's worth actually having programs like this as part of the project management programs at universities or the PMP, or is it something that individuals need to go outside, the field, like, joining Toastmasters or going and doing some kind of workshops outside, or do you think it's actually worth integrating the soft skill programs into the project management programs?
When we do at our college, I mean, I guess it depends on the instructor, but we try to have every single class
Mm,
students have to give presentations.
mm, mm, mm,
Even in here in grade school, and I've seen it, with my children in kindergarten,
mm,
first grade,
mm,
they'd have to get up in front of the class. I never had to speak in front of class.
mm,
Even in college, I
mm,
didn't have to, except for my Air Force
mm,
classes.
mm,
That's when I had to get up in front of first a class of 30, but then a group of, 200 people. But
mm,
in my regular programs, I didn't have to do that. So I think most colleges and universities are recognizing that people have to be able to speak and communicate.
mm,
So yes, I think it should be taught, but I think the more experiences you get,
mm,
the better, because it's
mm,
different in a classroom than
mm.
if you go somewhere else.
Exactly. So it's just also about giving students the opportunity to get up and present, no matter what. I mean, last week I noticed some of my students use palm cards. So last week I said, okay, I didn't tell them they need to do a presentation. So I said, okay, today you're just gonna get up, I do an impromptu presentation, no palm cards,
Mm.
no slides.
Yeah, no, I do not let students use those little index cards. I don't mind the slides as long as they don't read the slides. But and I tell them you want to do it like it's done in the business world. You will
Exactly.
never see someone holding index cards or prompt cards in the business
Exactly.
world,
Exactly.
but they will have a few visual aids.
Hmm. What they realize is they don't actually need it. I mean, they could get up and talk. It was just in their mind that they couldn't. They needed that. It was more of a habit rather than a skill deficiency.
Yeah,
So they
I
got
know
up.
one thing.
Hmm,
Yeah, one thing I was told, and it was my first year in the Air Force. So
hmm,
yeah, it was, just a year out of college, and we had a huge conference at our base, and there were going to be like thousands of people at this conference. And my boss was supposed to give a presentation on this project
hmm,
that I was working
hmm,
on, but he was just very scatterbrained and, not just a good presence on stage, and they didn't really want him to do it. So they asked me to do it,
hmm,
and I'm like, at first I'm like, wait a minute, there's going to be a lot of people there, so I did it. But I remember not that boss, but someone above him telling me that I knew more about this project than anyone in the audience. So you really have to build up your confidence and realize that you better know more than anyone in the audience, or you shouldn't be giving the presentation.
hmm,
So you just have to think that way, that you're trying to inform people and get the confidence that you know about it. But I mean, I'll still get nervous sometimes when I give a conference presentation, but that means you're more it's more serious, I think, if you still get a little bit of butterflies, and then sometimes you're more effective as well.
Exactly. And they say, there's never a time where you're completely confident. You still have that fear, but you just do it anyway. That it's just feeling a fear and doing it anyway, basically. And
Yeah.
and and
And
some.
then don't be afraid to say I don't know. If
Mm,
someone asks you a question that you don't know, say, well, I don't know, but you should be able to say who can answer that question. Don't try to be like a know-it-all and make up an answer when you don't know it. So,
sure, sure, sure. Um, Thanks, Kathy. And one other, just continuing with that complex project question. Are there projects that are inhibited by the use of project management methodologies? And if so, what is the best way to identify these types of projects and then manage them?
and yeah, that question, I mean, to me, any project should have some project management, but you don't need to do a ton of paperwork
Mm,
on a small project. So, I mean, you have to pick the level of project management, especially the level of paperwork
mhm,
that's needed. So yeah, even like with my project management class, I do have students do team projects. They're often for a real customer,
mhm,
but I only make them do, a handful of, documentation. They have to have a charter. They have to have a schedule. They have to have a scope statement, just a few things. I don't make them write up a detailed quality management plan and
mm,
risk management plan. And, so don't go overboard on all the documentation or even all the processes if you don't need them.
mm.
So tailor what you need for the project.
Exactly. So it's just using the right kind of tools that are required. It's not just about just throwing all the tools in and trying to make use of all of them. Is that right?
Right, right. And remember, the planning is only there to guide the execution. So
Hmm.
if someone can execute by just saying go, that's all you need. But if they need, a ton of paperwork and instructions and time, then that's what you need to do.
Right, right, right. So, any final words, Kathy, for the students, just guiding them through their course and their future in project management?
Well, I'd say, well, enjoy your college years. That is a good time. But yeah, study, listen to your professor, read your book. But yeah, always look for good opportunities and do the best you can in what you're doing at the moment, but keep an eye on something better.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thanks again for your time. It's been a pleasure, and
Hey,
I'm
welcome.